March 15th, 44 years before the Common Era. Rome. Julius Caesar is walking to a Senate meeting. In the fold of his toga lies a note, a small scroll of parchment that some anxious Greek just pressed into his hands. Caesar didn't even glance at it. Too many people, too much to do. In that note are 60 names, 60 men who in just a few minutes will plunge 23 daggers into him. But what if he actually read that note? One scroll, and the world as we know it dissolves like smoke. Today we're going to explore the most captivating alternative history of antiquity. A world where neither German nor English languages exist. A world where the Industrial Revolution happens 1,000 years earlier, and a world where Europe looks completely unrecognizable. Grab your popcorn. This is going to be interesting. So, 44 years before the Common Era, let's first understand what was actually happening in Rome, and why a group of senators decided to stage a public slaughter. Picture this. You have a village, about 300 people, and there's a council of elders that gathers once a week under a big oak tree, settling local matters, who and where grazes their cows, who owes whom 3 sacks of grain, a familiar system that's worked for centuries. Now imagine that this village suddenly came to control half the known world, from Gaul to Asia Minor, from the borders of Britain to Cleopatra's kingdom in Egypt. Millions of people, dozens of cultures, incredible wealth, and all of it trying to be governed by a council of elders under an oak tree. That's exactly what Rome was in 44 years before the Common Era. The Roman Republic had become a superpower, but its system of governance remained the same as it was 200 years earlier, when Rome was just one of many Italian cities. The Senate wasn't a parliament in the modern sense. It was a club of the wealthiest families, who passed power down through inheritance and treated the provinces as their personal cash cows. Doesn't sound that terrible, right? On paper, maybe. But in reality, it was an absolute disaster. By the middle of the 1st century before the Common Era, Rome was hit by a storm of social problems. Problem 1, slavery destroyed the middle class. After the conquests, millions of slaves flooded into Rome. Cheap labor displaced free farmers, the very people who had been the backbone of Roman society and its army for centuries. Land was bought up by the wealthy, creating vast estates, latifundia, worked exclusively by slaves. And the free citizens? They went bankrupt and streamed into Rome. This led to the second problem, unemployment and social upheaval. Hundreds of thousands of people in the capital with no jobs and no prospects. The state fed them free grain, but that wasn't a solution. It was a bandage on gangrene. These people were a social time bomb with a burning fuse. Problem 3, corruption of the highest order. Senators treated the provinces like ATM machines. Got appointed governor of Sicily or Asia Minor, looted for 3 years, come back a millionaire. Courts? You must be joking. The judges were fellow senators. They had no interest in convicting a man for doing what they did themselves, a mutual protection racket among the elite. The Roman Republic had turned into an oligarchic nightmare where a handful of families controlled everything, and the system was creaking so loudly you could hear it on the other side of the Mediterranean. And onto this stage steps Gaius Julius Caesar. By 44 years before the Common Era, he's already a legend. He conquered Gaul, modern-day France, crossed the Rubicon, crushed Pompey in the Civil War, and became the absolute ruler of Rome. His official title, Dictator Perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity. Think about that for a second. This isn't an insult, it's an actual office. Caesar received unlimited power legally because the crisis was so deep there was no other way out, and he began breaking the system. His reforms, he brought people from the provinces into the Senate, Gauls, Spaniards, and Greeks. Can you imagine the old elite's reaction? How can barbarians be made equal to the elite? He started forgiving debts and distributing land to veterans. This hit the moneylenders right in the wallet. He restricted provincial governors' corruption. Goodbye, easy fortune. He required that 1/3 of shepherds be free men, not slaves, which reduced unemployment. Caesar was a crisis manager, harsh, cynical, but effective. He was fixing the empire by ripping out rusted bolts with his bare hands. The old elite despised him. But let's talk about the people who decided to kill him. The official version they broadcast: "We're killing a tyrant for freedom. We're saving the Republic." Sounds noble, doesn't it? The reality was more prosaic. Marcus Junius Brutus, Gaius Cassius Longinus, and 58 others weren't afraid of tyranny. They were afraid of losing their privileges. Caesar was taking away their ability to plunder provinces, buy judges, and pass power down through generations like a family heirloom. This wasn't a fight for freedom. This was the elite fighting for the right to remain the elite. And they decided to remove him. Let's fast forward to the morning of that fateful day and see exactly how everything could have gone differently. Caesar is 55 years old. By ancient standards, already an old man. He's feeling unwell. Possibly he had a mild epileptic episode the night before. His wife Calpurnia is in a panic. She had a nightmare where she was holding her husband's bloodied body. She begs him not to go to the meeting. Caesar hesitates, but goes. He has important business there. He needs to approve plans for the Parthian campaign, which begins in 3 days. An important detail: the meeting isn't taking place in the Senate building. It burned down several years ago. The gathering is scheduled at the Theater of Pompey complex, a massive architectural ensemble built by his former enemy. Another important detail: Caesar had recently dismissed his personal guard. His Spanish bodyguards are no longer at his side. He believes that walking around surrounded by soldiers is a show of weakness. A fatal mistake. Caesar walks toward the Theater of Pompey. Around him, a crowd of petitioners, as always. Everyone wants to ask for something, complain about something. And from the crowd pushes through an anxious man. His name is Artemidorus of Cnidus, a Greek philosophy teacher. He grabbed Caesar by the arm and thrust a scroll into his hands.
Read immediately. It concerns your life.
This is an actual historical fact. Artemidorus really did give Caesar a note with the conspirators' names. In our reality, Caesar tucked the scroll into the fold of his toga. The crowd, the crush, the noise. He meant to read it later, and forgot. A few minutes later, he's stabbed to death. When they found the body, the scroll was still lying in the folds of his clothing, unopened. And now, the alternative fork in the road. Imagine that Caesar pauses, stops right at the entrance, parts the crowd of petitioners with a hard gaze, and reads 60 names. A list of assassins waiting for him inside. What does he do next? The logical thing would be to storm into the hall shouting "traitors," create a dramatic scene, right? But Caesar is no fool. He's the greatest strategist of his time. He looks at the scroll, looks at the entrance to the Theater of Pompey, and understands a simple thing. Inside are 60 men with daggers, and with him, no one. Walking in there is suicide, even if you know about the ambush. What does he have? Resource 1. Mark Antony, his closest ally, standing at the entrance. The conspirators are deliberately distracting him with conversation, so he won't enter with Caesar. Resource 2. A kilometer from the theater, on Tiber Island, is stationed the legion of Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, chief of cavalry, loyal to Caesar. Almost 5,000 soldiers. Caesar makes a simple strategic move. He turns around and leaves. He grabs Antony by the arm, briefly explains the situation, and the two of them walk briskly toward the Tiber, toward Lepidus's legion. And in the hall of the Theater of Pompey, panic. The conspirators are tense as bowstrings, daggers hidden in the folds of their togas. The plan rehearsed down to the last detail. Cimber will approach first, pretend to plead for his brother, grab Caesar by the toga, and that's the signal. 23 strikes. Fast, brutal, irreversible. They wait. 1 minute. 2. 5. Where is Caesar? Someone runs to check. Returns pale. He's gone. Together with Antony, they're heading toward the Tiber. Instant panic. Because if Caesar left, it means he knows. And if he knows the names, the conspirators are dead men. They have no army in the city. The legions are loyal to Caesar. All they have are daggers and the hope of surprise. Surprise has failed. The Senate empties within minutes. Brutus, Cassius, and the rest understand. They need to flee Rome immediately. Caesar declares a state of emergency. Lepidus's legion enters Rome. The list of conspirators is publicly read aloud. The Senate is convened for an emergency session, now under the protection of loyal soldiers. Some of the conspirators are arrested immediately. These are the ones who didn't escape in time. The key figures, Brutus, Cassius, Decimus, flee east to the provinces where they have connections. A brief civil war begins, but nothing like the one in our reality. In our reality, Caesar's assassination triggered 17 years of civil wars. Mark Antony against Caesar's assassins. Octavian against Antony. The Battle of Philippi. The Battle of Actium. Millions dead. The economy in ruins. The provinces completely plundered. In the alternative reality, it all ends in a year or two. At most. Why? Because Caesar is the greatest general of his era. He conquered Gaul, defeated Pompey, won dozens of battles. The conspirators have neither his genius, nor his experience, nor the legion's loyalty. Brutus and Cassius gather armies in Greece and Macedonia. Caesar gives them 6 months. Let them spend their money and nerves. Then he arrives with the main force, defeats them in 1 or 2 battles. And that's it. End of war. End of chaos. The empire preserves its resources, its people, its gold. And Caesar can focus on what he had planned to do, even before March 15th. The Parthian Project, Eastern superpower, March 18th, 44 years before the Common Era, 3 days after the planned assassination, Caesar was supposed to set out for the east. The campaign was already prepared. 16 legions, a massive supply train, new types of artillery, scorpions, ballistas mounted on wagons. The target, the Parthian Empire. This is modern-day Iran and Iraq, the only superpower capable of rivaling Rome. 7 years earlier, the Parthians had annihilated Crassus's Roman army at the Battle of Carrhae, one of the most humiliating defeats in Roman history. Caesar wants revenge. But not just that. Parthia controls the western section of the Great Silk Road. Whoever controls trade between China and Europe controls the world's gold. And Caesar understands this perfectly. Caesar's strategy is brilliantly simple. He doesn't repeat Crassus's mistake of pushing through the Syrian desert only to be trampled by Parthian cavalry. Caesar goes through the mountains of Armenia, logistically more difficult, but tactically correct. The mountains neutralize the Parthians' main advantage. Their heavy cavalry, cataphracts. Plus he has artillery, ballistas, and scorpions. Against the scattered formation of cavalry, they work like a mowing machine. 2 or 3 years of war, and Mesopotamia becomes a Roman province. The Roman Empire now stretches from the Atlantic to the Persian Gulf. But the most interesting part isn't even Parthia. The most interesting part is the north. Plutarch, the ancient biographer, mentions that Caesar planned to return from Parthia by an unusual route, through the Caucasus, then along the Black Sea, through Scythian territory, modern-day Ukraine, and strike at the Germanic tribes from behind. Think about what that means. In our reality, the border of the Roman Empire stopped at the Rhine. Beyond it, Germanic forests that Rome never managed to conquer. The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest, 9 years into the Common Era, definitively buried the idea of conquering Germania. The result? Europe split into 2 parts. West and South, the Romance world. France, Italy, Spain, Romania. Languages based on Latin. North and East, the Germanic world. Germany, England, Scandinavia. Languages of the Germanic group. This border exists to this day. It has defined Europe's culture, religion, and politics for 2,000 years. Now imagine that Caesar conquers Germania. the empire's borders shift to the Vistula, or even to the Dnieper. Germanic tribes become Romanized, just as the Gauls once became Romanized. What does this mean? The German language doesn't exist. All of Central Europe speaks dialects of Latin. The English language doesn't exist. The Anglo-Saxons, who will conquer Britain in the 5th century, are also Romanized. Britain speaks a Romance language, similar to French. All of Europe, from Portugal to Poland, is a single Romance cultural space. And all the great literature of Northern Europe is born in languages related to Italian and French, not in Germanic dialects. The butterfly effect in its purest form. One military campaign, and the linguistic map of the continent changes forever. But let's be honest, Caesar isn't immortal. He's 55 years old and 44 years before the Common Era. Even if he lives another 20 years, which is a very optimistic scenario for antiquity, sooner or later, the question arises: who inherits the empire? And here the real drama begins. Caesar has two potential heirs. Octavian, his great-nephew, officially adopted. Roman to the core, cold, calculating, a republican at heart. In our reality, he will become the first emperor, Augustus. Caesarion, his biological son by Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. Half Egyptian, raised at the Alexandrian court, a symbol of Eastern divine monarchy. See the conflict? This isn't just a fight for the throne. This is a battle between two models of statehood. Octavian embodies the Roman path. Preserve republican traditions, at least formally. Power is service. The emperor is first among equals. Caesarion embodies the Eastern path. Divine monarchy in the style of Egyptian pharaohs. The emperor is a living god, absolute power, without any half measures. Add to this Cleopatra, one of the most influential and intelligent women of her time. She's not just Caesar's lover, she's his partner and advisor, and she desperately lobbies for her son's interests. Caesar ages, tension rises. The empire fractures into factions even during his lifetime. And when he finally dies, from old age or illness, doesn't matter. A new civil war begins. But, and this is the key point, by then the empire is much stronger. Parthia is conquered. Germania is conquered. The economy is stable. The army is loyal. This isn't the chaos of the 40s and 30s in our reality. The war between Octavian and Caesarion will be brutal but short, and the victor will inherit the most powerful empire the ancient world has ever seen. And now, the most speculative, but also the most fascinating part. Could Caesar's Roman Empire have launched the Industrial Revolution 1,000 years earlier? Sounds crazy, right? But let's look at the facts. Fact 1. Caesar began reforming slave labor. He required that 1/3 of shepherds be free men, not slaves. Why? To reduce unemployment among citizens. But there's a side effect. Making labor more expensive stimulates technological invention. Slave labor is cheap. Why invent machines when you can just buy 10 more slaves? It's a technological dead end. But if labor becomes more expensive, there's an economic incentive to invent devices that can replace people. Fact 2. The Alexandrian School of Science. In Egypt, under Cleopatra's patronage, there already exists an established tradition of mechanical engineering. Ctesibius invented the water clock and the hydraulic organ even before Caesar was born. There's already an understanding of the principles of pneumatics and hydraulics. And several decades later, an engineer named Hero of Alexandria will create a prototype steam engine. The Ellipile, a ball that spins under the power of steam. A toy? Yes, but the principle is exactly the same as the steam engines of the 18th century. The problem is that in our reality, nobody needs it. Slave labor is cheap. There's no reason to invest in strange mechanisms. The Ellipile remains a toy. But in a world where Caesar stayed in power, everything is different. The empire is stable. Fewer wars, trade flourishes. Caesar patronizes the sciences. He was an intellectual himself, reformed the calendar, and corresponded with scholars. Cleopatra invests money in the Library of Alexandria and scientific schools. Now add the economic incentive. Slave labor gradually becomes more expensive. Alternatives are needed. Alexandrian engineers receive funding. They develop Caesarius's ideas. They move forward. After several generations, someone figures out how to make steam do useful work, rather than just spin a toy. Is a technological breakthrough possible? Now that idea doesn't sound so strange, does it? But for an industrial revolution, you need more than just a steam engine. You need metallurgy at a certain level, a culture of engineering thought, investment, social conditions, and the Roman Empire had all of this in embryonic form under the right conditions: stability, investment in science, economic necessity. It could have begun moving in this direction hundreds, if not 1,000 years earlier. Imagine steam-powered ships on the Mediterranean in the 3rd century. Mechanized production in the 4th and 5th centuries, railways connecting Rome and Alexandria by the 6th century. This isn't fantasy. This is alternative history, based on real technologies that already existed. Let's sum up this wild journey. One scroll, read in time. And the world changes beyond recognition. Caesar survives. A short civil war instead of 17 years of chaos. Parthia conquered. Germania conquered. All of Europe speaks dialects of Latin, a possible technological breakthrough centuries earlier. Sounds like utopia? Not so fast, because all of this is bought at the price of one simple thing: freedom. Caesar is a dictator, lifelong, absolute, tolerating no objection. His reforms are effective, but they destroy the last remnants of republican institutions. In our reality, Caesar's assassination didn't save the Republic. It died anyway, transforming into the empire under Augustus. But at least the idea of republicanism survived, which 2,000 years later would inspire the French and American revolutions. In a world where Caesar survived, that idea is strangled in the cradle. No republic, only empire. Stable, powerful, but absolutist. The butterfly effect works both ways. Europe is wealthier and more technologically advanced, but it's more authoritarian. Perhaps in such a world, democracy in the modern sense never emerges. Perhaps the Enlightenment never happens. Perhaps human rights remain an alien concept. Here's a question for you. What's better? A stable, prosperous empire with absolute government control? Or chaos, wars, but with the preservation of the idea of freedom and self-governance? The Roman senators had their answer. They chose daggers. What would your choice be? Share your opinion in the comments. And if you found this video interesting and want more content like this, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next episode.